if you're around the kid enough, it changes who you are. And if you're not around the kid, it changes who you are, because then you realize you're not around the kid, and that's going to take a piece out of who you think you are.
There are a lot of podcasts out there that get a lot of attention for a lot of reasons. And one of them is the Joe Rogan Experience. Joe Rogan is a man who's gone and done various things in his career, including being the voice of the UFC. And never being afraid to say what's on his mind, even when it's not exactly the smartest thing to say. Looking at you and your COVID vaccine analysis, Joe. Anyway, while he is always someone to go and get loud when the time comes, he also someone who isn't afraid to get a bit emotional when the situation calls for it. Allow us to show you Joe Rogan breaks down in tears during podcasts because of this. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. 6. Talking about his kids. Let's be honest here. An interview with the lead singer of a rock band may not be the place most people would expect an emotional JRE moment to come from. But Rogan's conversation with garbage frontwoman Shirley Manson provided just that. And it was pretty special, to be frank. In the episode, the rocker talked about the pitfalls of fame and success in the music industry, with the pair eventually getting on to the topic of Joe's kids, a subject that Rogan rarely talks about during the podcast. Rogan's unconditional love for his children is obvious from the outset of the conversation, as he discusses just how hard it is for put into words just how much he cares about them, and how having children changed him and many of the peers profoundly as people. For those who haven't seen the podcast, it's definitely worth going back to watch, as an awesome episode with a guest full of great stories and interesting perspectives. Plus, it shows a more tender side of Joe, as he's not trying to do bravado or calling out people for their crap. He's just going and speaking from his heart, and that's beautiful. But if you want to go and hear Joe get emotional by calling out someone's crap, we've got you covered. 5. Candace Owens. Global warming. It's a thing. And it's a thing that needs to be talked about. But it also needs to be talked about by those who are actually informed and know what they're saying. When Joe Rogan had political activist Candace Owens on his podcast, she noted that she didn't believe in global warming. And she noted she wasn't informed on the subject and just didn't believe in it outright. Let's see how Joe Rogan reacts to that one.
You don't think we have to care about the environment? Like, what do you...
No, not even a little bit.
Not even a little bit?
No. Okay, let me clarify this. I don't throw trash on the ground. Like, okay. I'm not saying like...
In short, he went off on her and noted that she shouldn't voice an opinion like that if she wasn't well read up on it, and cited just about 100% of scientists in the world today believe in global warming. She tried to stick to her stance though, and Joe repeatedly bashed her for it. Especially because she's a public figure and she has influence with her words. Which is true, because over the last 4 years especially, we've seen a lot of public figures try and use their sway to enforce certain false ideas and values in order to make them seem true because they said it, and that's wrong and stupid. Now, someone point out that very recently Joe went and made a similar mistake about the COVID vaccine, as we alluded to in our intro. But he was also quick to correct his mistake and note that he is not the person to take medical advice on. He walked it back, and she didn't, and that's why Joe was so livid. 4. Elon Musk cry for change. Elon Musk's appearance on the JRE will be forever remembered for the Tesla CEO smoking a joint as they talked. It was a "did that really just happen" moment. And the answer was an emphatic yes. However, despite some awkwardness in the early going on the episode, that particular back and forth in regard to the whole episode offers a fascinating insight in the mindset of one of the world's true visionaries. While Musk has certainly established himself as a somewhat polarizing figure for some of his actions and statements throughout the years, it's impossible to argue that he doesn't wholeheartedly believe that his ideas could benefit humanity. This was evident during his conversation with Rogan, as Musk stresses the necessity for radical change in order to ensure a sustainable future for the planet. While the emotion of this entry may not be as overt as others in the list, this episode deserved inclusion for the passion which Musk tossed about humanity's efforts on the planet, and how Joe took it all in. Because say what you want about Joe Rogan, he's never afraid to go and bring in infinitely smarter people than him and be amazed at what they reveal to him. 3. Rogan talks Ronda Rousey. Ronda Rousey's impact on the sport of mixed martial arts is unquestionable. She fully changed the combat sports landscape during the peak of her fame and won in the octagon and beyond. When the Olympic bronze medalist made her second appearance in the JRE in 2015, she was riding a 12-fight unbeaten streak in the professional ranks, capped off with a knockout win over Beth Correa to defend the UFC's Women's Bantam Championship in her opponent's home country of Brazil. Few observers at the time would predict that this would mark the final time Rousey would get her hand raised inside the octagon. Rogan was clearly a huge admirer of Rousey's prowess in the cage, as demonstrated by how emotional he got recounting his experience of witnessing her landmark victory in one episode of the podcast. Holding back tears, Rogan explained that he was overwhelmed with emotion as he knew that he was witnessing history with Rousey's win. It sometimes gets downplayed just how much Joe Rogan loves the UFC and being a commentator on the sport. He really loves this sport. That's why he's been a part of it for so long. His passion was overflowing here, and yeah, it made him cry. 2. Usman and the mom. One of the things that is bound to draw an emotional response from almost everyone is witnessing the unconditional love of a parent. This was particularly evident after Kamaru Usman dethroned Tyron Woodley at UFC 235 to win the UFC welterweight championship. During Woodley's run at the top of the 170-pound division, one of his ever-present events of his bouts was the presence of his mother in attendance to support him. After Woodley violently defeated Darren Till at the UFC 228, UFC cameras captured Woodley's mother offering the distraught contender emotional support following the fight and reassuring him that he would come back stronger. Woodley's mother would prove to be just as gracious even when her son was defeated, however, hugging a weeping Usman after UFC 235 and reassuring him that there was clearly no hard feelings. When Usman appeared on the JRE MMA show in 2019, he explained that he previously met Woodley at a UFC event, making the video of Woodley's mother embracing Usman following the fight even more emotional. Rogan couldn't help but tear up as he rewatched the moment with them. And honestly, we couldn't blame him at all for that. 1. The bromance. Joe Rogan has a lot of friends he brings on the show, and some of them you can honestly say he has a bromance with. There's the fight companion crew of Brian Callen, Eddie Bravo, and Brendan Schaub, and his circle of friends from the California comedy scene, which includes Tom Segura, Bert Kreischer, and Ari Shaffir. And when these guys are on and drinks are passed around between them, things get emotional. During a podcast with the Sober October crew back in 2017, Rogan discussed how alcohol helped him to express how important his friends are to him, getting a little emotional in the process. Rogan and his friends demonstrated how close they are as they took turns heaping praise on each other. The degree in which Joe clearly cares about his friends is obvious, and only makes his concern in a future episode with Ari Shaffir even more poignant. Isn't it just nice to go and have friends that you can share something with? It really is a beautiful thing. So what do you think? What do you think about these times when Joe Rogan was on his podcast and he had to go and get emotional? Or just get emotional because of something he talked about or witnessed? Does this go and give you a different viewpoint of Joe Rogan? Do you think that he's a deeper guy than he lets on at points? What other podcast interviews do you remember when Joe cries or gets very emotional? Let us know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you next time on the channel.